gives Canadian companies permanent access to state and local government procurement in the United States. Canada's strategy for economic success must leverage our considerable strengths, in particular our world-leading financial industry and energy resource endowment.
The unique strengths of Canada's financial industry set Canada apart during the global financial crisis. The World Economic Forum, among others, has recognized Canada's banking system as the strongest in the world. Our government will build upon this advantage to make Canada an even stronger world financial center, recognizing the critical importance of sound securities regulation, both to attract investment and crack down on white-collar crime. Our government will act within the ambit of the Constitution to create a Canadian securities regulator. Our energy resource endowment provides Canada with an unparalleled economic advantage that we must leverage to secure our place as a clean energy superpower and a leader in green job creation. We are the world's 7th largest crude oil producer, with the 2nd largest proven reserves. We are the 3rd largest natural gas producer, the 3rd largest hydroelectric generator, the largest producer of uranium, and by far the largest supplier of energy resources to the world's largest marketplace. To support responsible development of Canada's energy and mineral resources, our government will untangle the daunting maze of regulations that needlessly complicates project approvals, replacing it with simpler, clearer processes that offer improved environmental protection and greater certainty to industry. Our government will continue to invest in clean energy technologies. It will renew energy efficiency and emissions reduction programs to ensure they are effective. And it will position Canada's nuclear industry to capitalize on the opportunities of the global nuclear renaissance, beginning with the restructuring of Atomic Energy of Canada Limited. Enfin,
our strategy for the economy must create the conditions for continued success in the industries that are the foundation for Canada's prosperity and support thousands of communities, both rural and urban. Our government will partner with the forest industry to enter new markets and deploy new technologies while respecting the softwood lumber agreement with the United States.
It will introduce new legislation to reform Canada's outdated system of fisheries management. It will take steps to support a competitive livestock industry and pursue market access for agricultural products. Our government will also ensure the freedom of choice for which Western barley farmers overwhelmingly voted, and it will continue to defend supply management of dairy and poultry products.
Small and medium-sized businesses are the engines of the Canadian economy, responsible for the creation of most new jobs. To support them, our government will continue to identify and remove unnecessary job-killing regulation and barriers to growth.
It will take further steps to support the competitiveness of Canadian manufacturers, and recognizing the strategic importance of a strong domestic shipbuilding industry, it will continue to support the industry's sustainable development through a long-term approach to federal procurement. Our government will also explore ways to better protect workers when their employers go bankrupt. industry or region, Canadians have always striven toward a common objective: to make a home and nurture a family. For many Canadians, there can be no greater accomplishment than to provide for their children, to contribute to the local community, and to live in a safe and secure country. Our government shares and supports these aspirations. To help Canadian families to balance work and family life, our government introduced the universal child care benefit to provide $100 per month for each child under the age of 6. This is direct financial support to working families that gives them the freedom to choose the best child care for them. Our government will strengthen this benefit for sole support, single-parent families. Protecting the health and safety of Canadians and their families is a priority for our government. This commitment was reflected in its decision to secure the H1N1 vaccine for every Canadian, to assure parents that their children's food, medicine, and toys are safe. Our government will reintroduce legislation to protect Canadian families from unsafe food, drug, and consumer products. Our government will respect the wishes of Canadians by reintroducing the consumer product safety legislation in its original form.
Our government will continue to strengthen Canada's food safety system. It will ensure that families have the information they need to make informed choices, and it will hold those who produce, import, and sell goods in Canada accountable for the safety of Canadians. To prevent accidents that harm our children and youth, our government will also work in partnership with non-governmental organizations to launch a national strategy on childhood injury prevention.
Just as we know that parents are in the best position to make decisions for their families, the best solutions to the diverse challenges confronting Canada's communities are often found locally. Every day, the power of innovation is seen at work in communities across this country as citizens, businesses, and charitable groups join forces to tackle local problems. Too often, however, grassroots efforts are hobbled by red tape. Too often, local solutions are denied access to government assistance because they do not fit the bureaucratic definition of the problem. Too often, the efforts of communities falter not on account of a lack of effort of heart, but because of a lack of expertise to turn good ideas into reality. Our government will take steps to support communities in their efforts to tackle local challenges. It will look to innovative charities and forward-thinking private sector companies to partner on new approaches to many social challenges. To recognize the enormous contribution volunteers make to Canada, our government will also establish a Prime Ministerial Award for volunteerism. Our communities are built on the rule of law, the cornerstone of peace, order, and good government. The law must protect everyone, and those who commit crimes must be held to account. Canadians want a justice system that delivers justice. We know we can protect ourselves without compromising the values that define our country. Our
government acted decisively to crack down on crime and ensure the safety and security of our neighborhoods and communities. It introduced laws mandating prison sentences for gun crimes, toughening sentencing for dangerous criminals, raising from 16 or to 16 from 14 the age of protection from adult sexual predators, and ensuring that criminals serve sentences that reflect the severity of their crimes. Our government will now focus on the further protection of children, women, and victims of white-collar crime. It will protect the most vulnerable members of society, our children. It will introduce legislation to increase the penalties for sexual offenses against children, as well as legislation to strengthen the sex offender registry. It will protect children from internet luring and cyber abuse.
Our government will also ensure the youth criminal justice system responds strongly to those few who commit serious and violent crimes, while focusing on the rehabilitation of all young offenders. Our government will propose laws ensuring that for multiple murderers, life means life, and requiring that violent offenders serve their time in jail, not in the luxury of home. It will reintroduce tough legislation to combat the organized criminal drug trade. Our government will respect the will of Canadians by reintroducing this legislation in its original form. Our government will take additional action to address the disturbing number of unsolved cases of murdered and missing Aboriginal women. The Sisters in Spirit initiative has drawn particular attention to this pressing criminal justice priority. Our government will also introduce legislation to crack down on white-collar crime and secure justice for victims through tougher sentences. Hard-working Canadians who entrust their retirement savings to others have a right to see that trust honored. Justice must be effective, swift, and true. It must also be fair to victims of crime. To ensure justice is effective, our government will introduce legislation to give police investigative powers for the 21st century. Canada's police officers and chiefs have asked for these vital tools to stay ahead of the tactics adopted by today's criminals. To ensure justice is delivered swiftly, our government will introduce legislation to improve criminal procedures to cut the number of long, drawn-out trials. Notre gouvernement
Our government will also offer tangible support to innocent victims of crime and their families. It will give families of murder victims access to special benefits under employment insurance. It will introduce legislation to give employees of federally regulated industries the right to unpaid leave if they or members of their families are victimized by crime. And our government will introduce legislation to make the victim surcharge mandatory to better fund victim services. Just as criminals threaten Canadians' personal safety, terrorists threaten our country's security. Our peaceful, prosperous, and pluralistic society is one of the safest places in the world to live. Yet Canada faces real, significant, and shifting threats. Our government will take steps to safeguard Canada's national security.
It will make travel by air safer by employing the latest screening practices and detection technologies for passengers and cargo. While the cost of air security must be borne by businesses and individuals who use air transport, our government will ensure their contribution is invested responsibly and effectively and delivers measurable results. It will introduce a new biometric passport that will significantly improve security. It will modernize the judicial tools employed to fight terrorism and organized crime. Working with provinces, territories, and the private sector, our government will implement a cybersecurity strategy to protect our digital infrastructure. Canadians believe sacrifice and hard work should be recognized. As we strive to create an even better future for our families and communities, our government will stand up for those who built and defended this country. Grâce à l'excellence de nos soins de santé et de notre qualité de vie, l'espérance de vie des Canadiens est
mean that Canadians now enjoy one of the longest life expectancies in the world. As more and more Canadians enter their golden years, our government will seek to enhance their well-being. This demographic shift poses a challenge to the sustainability of our social programs and our economy. Our government will meet the demands of the aging population. Our government has taken numerous measures to assure our senior citizens that Canada's retirement income system is the strongest in the world. Among other measures, our government has introduced tax-free savings accounts and income splitting for Canada's pensioners.
And those planning for retirement, our government will continue to work with the provinces and territories on options to further strengthen Canada's retirement income system. In recognition of the contributions seniors make to society, our government will support legislation establishing Seniors' Day. Just as generations of Canadians worked on the home front to build this great country, so too have generations of veterans fought to defend Canada and Canadian values around the world. We are reminded of the bravery and sacrifice of those who serve in our armed forces, and we celebrate this year's centenary of the Royal Canadian Navy, and as we mark the passing of John Henry Foster Babcock, the last surviving Canadian veteran of World War I. A national day of commemoration will be held on Vimy Ridge Day, April 9th, to celebrate the contribution his generation made to the cause of freedom.
Today, however, a new generation of men and women in uniform continues to stand up for the values and principles Canadians hold dear. In Afghanistan, the Canadian forces prepare for the end of the military mission in 2011 with the knowledge that, through great sacrifice and with great distinction, their efforts saved Kandahar province from falling back under Taliban control. After 2011, our effort in Afghanistan will focus on development and humanitarian aid. In Haiti, the Canadian forces have taken the lessons learned in Afghanistan and put them to use in very different circumstances. Their speed and effectiveness in deployment were and are unsurpassed in the world.
To serve Canada in the profession of arms is an extraordinary and honorable acceptance of risks, many of which cannot be foreseen, and all of which may have profound personal consequences for those who assume them. Our government has supported our men and women in uniform, not only in words, but by making the investments necessary to rebuild Canada's military. Our government will continue to stand up for our military and our veterans. Our government will change the unfair rules restricting access to benefits under employment insurance for military families who have paid into the system for years. To further commemorate the sacrifices of our armed forces, our government will bring individuals, groups, and businesses together to build community war memorials. Our government has established the new Veterans Charter and an ombudsman, expanded the Veterans Independence Program, and in recognition of the gallant service of Allied veterans who fought alongside Canadian troops during the Second World War and the Korean War, reinstated benefits under the War Veterans Allowance Act. Our government will continue to modernize support systems for Canadian veterans. Honoring those who built this country includes recognizing the contribution of those who make their living on the land and the realities of rural life in Canada. Our government will continue to support legislation to repeal the wasteful and ineffective long-gone registry that targets law-abiding farmers and hunters, not criminals. Notre gouvernement reconnaît également
Our government also recognizes the contributions of Canada's Aboriginal people. Too often, their stories have been ones of sorrow. Our government will continue to build on its historic apology for the treatment of children in residential schools. After settling 17 specific claims since this Parliament began, it will continue to work to resolve additional claims. Having made safe drinking water and effective wastewater treatment on reserve a national priority, our government will introduce new legislative measures to further this goal.
It is only 50 years ago that Aboriginal people in Canada were granted the right to vote. To further protect the rights of Aboriginal people, particularly women living on reserve, our government will take steps to ensure the equitable distribution of real property assets in the event of death, divorce, or separation. It will also introduce legislation to comply with a recent court decision in order to address gender inequality under the Indian Act. Our values as Canadians are rooted in our history and in our institutions. Our parliamentary democracy, which brought together people of many lands, faiths, and languages to live in harmony. Our federal system, which recognizes our differences while advancing our unity. Our official languages, our northern landscape. Notre pays laisse encore couler de l'encre sur les pages de son histoire. Le mois dernier, les Canadiens
took part in the inspired performances of our Olympic athletes at the Winter Games in Vancouver. And they cheered when Alexandre Bilodeau won our first ever Olympic gold medal on our own soil. But our athletes did not stop at just one. They surpassed the record for the most gold medals ever won at a Winter Olympics. We are proud of our medalists and the entire Canadian Olympic team. Next week, the Paralympic Games will officially begin, and again we will cheer as our athletes take on the world. Our government will continue to invest in world-class Canadian athletics.
shared understanding of Canadian history unites us as citizens. 2 years ago, we celebrated the 400th anniversary of the founding of Quebec City. This year, we mark the quadricentenary of the settling of Cupids, Newfoundland and Labrador. 2 years hence, our government will engage millions of citizens and strengthen knowledge and pride in Canada by commemorating the bicentennial of the War of 1812, an event that was key to shaping our identity as Canadians and ultimately our existence as a country. That year, Canadians will also celebrate the 60th anniversary of the accession of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, Queen of Canada, and our government has established a Diamond Jubilee Committee to prepare for this historic occasion. Our government will also ask Parliament to examine the original gender-neutral English wording of the national anthem. We are a country founded on democracy. Our shared values and experiences must be reflected in our national institutions, starting with Parliament. To reflect the growing number of Canadians living in Ontario, British Columbia, and Alberta, our government will follow through on its commitment to address their underrepresentation, consistent with the fundamental, democratic, constitutional principle of representation by population in the House of Commons. It will propose legislation to increase voter participation by expanding advance voting in elections. Our government also remains committed to Senate reform and will continue to pursue measures to make the upper chamber more democratic, effective, and accountable. Our government recognizes the Public Service of Canada as a critical national institution. Our government will continue to support the renewal of the public service and ensure it is ready for the changes required by the aging of its own and the wider Canadian labour force. Notre pays est bilingue.
We are a bilingual country. Canada's 2 official languages are an integral part of our history and position us uniquely in the world. Building on the recognition that the Québécois form a nation within a united Canada and the roadmap for Canada's linguistic duality, our government will take steps to strengthen further Canada's francophone identity. It will also continue to respect provincial jurisdiction and to restrict the use of spending power.
We are a country with an Aboriginal heritage. A growing number of states have given qualified recognition to the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. Our government will take steps to endorse this aspirational document in a manner fully consistent with Canada's Constitution and laws. We are a country of immigrants. Our identities are bound up in the stories of ancestors from hundreds of lands. To share these stories, our government will introduce legislation to establish Pier 21 in Halifax, the site where so many began their Canadian journey, as Canada's National Museum of Immigration. It will continue to work with the provinces to strengthen recognition of foreign credentials through the Pan-Canadian Framework for the Assessment and Recognition of Foreign Qualifications. To better protect would-be immigrants, our government